I'll go ahead and announce now for anybody here that cares for the actual meeting. Items 8, 9, and 12 are going to be tabled. 12 at the request of the developer, and 8 and 9 at the request of the mayor and council. So if you're here waiting on those items, wait no longer, because you will not hear them tonight. And then number 1 on the work session agenda has been pulled. So we will go straight into number 2, which is the Historical Preservation Committee. We've got Mary Shell here. And then we have a representative from the Historical Preservation Committee. Y'all come on up.
Hi, my name is Lisa Ashley.
Come on, have a seat.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Lisa Ashley. I've been on the Historical Preservation Committee since January. And Mary Shell is here. She's the preservation planner for the Alabama Historical Commission, and she's going to speak to y'all about. You can go ahead.
The Historic Preservation Committee and Sherry Lee. Is that on? There you go. All right. The Historic Preservation Committee and Sherry Lee had me down a month or so ago, and I talked to them about setting up a Historic Preservation Commission that would be different than a committee, and what that would entail. And they wanted me to come back and talk to council at the work session to just give y'all some information. The committee that you have now doesn't really have a purpose. The Preservation Commission is a organization that the city can set up by ordinance. There's state enabling legislation that allows cities to set up at least a 7-member Preservation Commission. They have a lot of different duties and abilities. They can help the city with preservation programs, with training and educational activities, with helping the city document and survey historic buildings. You have a National Register district downtown. You've got several residential areas as well that have historic designation. When I was here with Sherry, she showed me some of the African American community around Young Street and the park and the old school property there, and was interested in helping them get those resources designated. So a local preservation commission, that would be one of their main roles, would be to help the city identify and document those resources. They can go on to list them on the National Register. You've probably got more resources that would be eligible for that listing. They can work with the city and the community members, property owners, to help them understand what the benefits of historic preservation are. They can also work with City Council on designating local historic districts for regulation. The Preservation Commission would recommend those districts or individual properties after doing studies, having public meetings with the property owners of that area, and then it would be up to City Council on whether or not that area would be designated. So the designation, the ordinance that would set up the Preservation Commission would just be setting up that organization and that process, but that group would have a lot of other work to do in order to come to City Council and request anything be designated for regulation. The regulations are intended to protect the integrity of these districts. The National Register is designating buildings that have integrity, that have their historic materials, and when you have these kinds of regulations, it can make sure that the changes people do would be appropriate. But again, that is something that the Preservation Commission would work with property owners, downtown, neighborhoods, other areas, and see if they could build support for that. The regulations would also look at new construction to make sure it was compatible. I was looking at your comprehensive plan this morning, and you do have some things in there about protecting the character. There's language about developing a pattern book for architectural design that reflects the city scales materials, and building composition. And that's basically what these regulations would be for historic districts, would be reinforcing that those characteristics are maintained and promoted. The reason I go around to communities and help city councils understand this program is the Alabama Historical Commission has the Certified Local Government Program. We get funding from the National Park Service each year, and 10% of that has to be subgranted to communities that are certified local governments. So if Fairhope can set up a commission, the commission membership, they have to have training, knowledge, experience in history, design, architecture, law, and other fields like that. If at least 3 of the members can show training in those areas, the city has a staff person that can be the contact between our office and the city, and does an annual report. It's a pretty easy program to get certified into, and then you're eligible for matching grants to do the different studies for National Register documentation, any kind of feasibility studies if you have a building that you're trying to rehab or promoting for redevelopment, website development to show your historic resources, tourism type materials, plans for wayfinding systems. We will give communities grants for staffing if they set up locally regulated districts to help them have some professional assistance as they kind of get their legs under them with that program. And pre-development, we don't do any brick and mortar projects with this money, but we'll help you do plans and specs for the rehabilitation of buildings. The benefits of being listed on the National Register. There's a property tax reduction if you're in an income producing building, commercial building, assessed at that rate, and you're on the register or in a district as a contributing building, your property tax can be reduced to the residential rate, so they can be cut in half. There are federal and state tax credits for rehabilitation. The federal program is just for commercial property. The state program is for commercial and residential property. There are also programs like facade easements, facade rehabilitation plans and programs that National Register buildings typically can bring funding in. We also have programs that help promote heritage tourism. And I know you're looking at a Park Service project now on connectivity and trails in the community. That was something Sherry Lee had talked to me about. And I think that's the group that talked to her too, because the Park Service folks were telling her, if your community was a certified local government, then that's another funding source to help you with some of these initiatives, like designating the properties around Young Street and updating other districts. That's kind of it in a nutshell, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. I know the city has looked at this on and off for many years. I was telling Lisa, I was here 20 years ago talking to the city about this program, and at that point there was an impetus to set up a commission, but that is kind of where the committee came out of that effort at that time.
Thank you, by the way, for that. It sounds like the biggest benefit to changing from a committee to a commission is the opportunity to open ourselves up for some additional help and funding through this certified local government program that you're talking about. Are there any of those any other municipalities that are members of that in our local area?
Yeah, Foley and Magnolia Springs I'm in the county, and Mobile has had this program for a long time. And a lot of communities, they might have property in Mobile and they know how that program works, and they feel like it's going to be exactly the same in their community, but each community kind of has a program specific to their wants and desires, as well as the kind of resources they have. So you have a lot of flexibility on how you set up those design guidelines and those regulations if you want to go on that level. We have about 6 of the 30 certified local governments that still have not set up any local districts, but they work on designations and other kind of advocacy approaches.
What is the downside of doing something like this?
I'm probably not the person to ask.
Well, I mean, you know, if it opens you up to additional funding and it gives you the opportunity to do some things you otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to do, then my question is why didn't everybody do it?
The fear of regulation.
Regulation by the-
Of setting up a
Telling people what
locally,
they can do with their
a
house
locally
and-
regulated historic district where you would have design guidelines that would say, you know, if you do an addition, it needs to be this way. It would help protect the materials on the building, like the historic windows. If they're not deteriorated, if they can be repaired, then you would want them to repair those windows. But to be a certified local government, you don't have to set up a locally regulated district. And City Council is very much in control of that process, since the Preservation Commission just recommends to council that a district be set up. And if council sets one up and things don't go well, then y'all can revoke that ordinance as well. So I feel like that fear really isn't based in anything, because council's still pretty much in control. And I've never seen a local district get designated unless the people that own property in that district support it. And that's part of what the Preservation Commission has to do, is to do advocacy, education, help people understand what the benefits are, and then see if enough interest bubbles up. By being a certified local government, we could bring some resources to help them do those activities, to help them bring in speakers, to help them do training, because we are interested in protecting historic property and maintaining the National Register designations in communities across Alabama.
When they say districts, I'm assuming you mean districts as opposed to imposing on the entire town.
Right, the
block.
ordinance that's based on the state code requires that you have a study that's a survey, a picture coded to a map, and a description of each building, the year it was built, to develop, you know, where you've got a core of historic buildings. Your downtown along Fairhope Avenue still has a lot of integrity. And that area might be the only part of downtown that would be considered for the district, because when you get further beyond, there's new buildings, and you're not going to bring new buildings into a historic district. It's only going to document and protect what's there today. And it's not making anybody freeze their building in time. You know, we understand adaptive reuse, so that's why I'm saying these design guidelines, depending on the community and the location, can be flexible to fit the property owners and community needs.
Is there a number as far as age? You say new to old. What?
Yeah, the National Register says if it's 50 years old, you can start, you know, looking at it. That doesn't mean everything 50 years old is significant. There are things that you can designate earlier. We designated several civil rights related sites, probably when they were about 40 years old, because at that time we understood the significance of those.
I have a couple questions. I'm sorry for arriving late, but I'm on the liaison to the Historic Preservation Committee, and I also was out of town when you came to speak to that group, so hate that I missed you. But if this isn't a recap, but to be designated a CLG, does that also allow us to possibly have access to some funding or funds for different rehabilitation projects? Because one issue that I've felt we hit as a city is there's not an incentive to encourage people to try to, I guess, rehab historical properties. And I'm wondering if there's any kind of tax incentives that we would be able to get once we have that CLG designation.
The CLG grants, we don't use for
Grants.
brick and mortar projects.
Okay.
It is Park Service funding. We do pre-development, so if you have a building the city's rehabbing, we can do plans and specs for that project.
Okay.
But it's typically just for public buildings. We're not gonna pay for a private property kind of plan, since this is government money. We talked earlier about the Preservation Commission could advocate and educate people on the federal and state tax credits that are available. The federal is a 25%, the state is a 20% credit on what you spend can come back as a personal tax credit. The state program's very interesting because if your tax liability is less than that credit, they'll just cut you a check for the difference. So that's a pretty nice program there. The federal doesn't play quite that way.
Do we need to be a CLG community in order to have citizens be able to qualify for that?
That is National Register
Okay.
listing. But I was saying earlier, this kind of program to protect the district through regulations, that's how you can maintain that National Register listing, so those kinds of incentives are available for present and future property owners.
Okay.
Now, also, when I talked to the committee, a lot of cities will do voluntary design guidelines, just so people, you know, over a period of time can understand what those are, bring their project to the commission, and they could get a reading on whether or not what they were doing was appropriate, kind of have a discussion, but then none of that would be binding. So that's kind of a strategy some cities will use to kind of test the program and let the property owners kind of understand better how it's managed before anything official is set in place.
Yeah, for somebody to receive those tax credits, they would have to be in the historic district?
You have to be in the district in a contributing building, because the district, some of the buildings are historic and have integrity. Some might be new or have been renovated beyond recognition.
Yeah.
So the ones that have that contributing classification that still have their historic characteristics. And then we have individually nominated properties. I think y'all got, like the organic school, I think y'all got a few that are just listed as individual properties.
I can add that I guess the Historic Preservation Committee, the ordinance that was founded on, their primary, if not sole purpose, is to determine whether or not we should establish a historic commission. So this is the next step for that committee, would be to establish a historic commission in order to become a CLG. I hate to ask you to recap anything you missed, but did I miss anything major in the beginning?
I guess one interesting thing, y'all asked me the other CLGs and Foley, you know, they don't quite have the development pressure that you guys do, but I think they're positioning themselves. I think they're going to see some of that. There's an old potato shed building, the Hamburg building, that's on the old railroad trail, now the Rose Trail. Are any of y'all familiar with that building? The owners gave it to the city and they got a CLG grant. There's a group, Design Alabama, that's part of the State Arts Council. And they brought in about 5 different design professionals, and we spent 3 days there, got a lot of public input. And the report should be on their website in a week or two. But looking at how to reimagine that building to be a venue space, and I understand it's the only potato shed left on that corridor, and you know, agricultural history was such a big deal here. They're partnering with the school system. They've got 700-something kids in their FFA program, and they're training them on carpentry and some of those skills. The math classes were figuring out how much paint it would take to paint the building, and they're trying to bring it into the curriculum. So that's not designated, but it's a historic building. It's part of their downtown district. So that's kind of a project that the Preservation Commission was able to bring because they have this program and are a certified local government.
Anything else, guys? Would you like to add anything?
No, you good?
All right. Well, I appreciate you being here. Thank you
All
for your
right,
time.
well, I'm
Thank
in
you very
Montgomery. This is my job, so if y'all have any questions, feel free to contact me. Lisa can get you my information.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
All right. Ms. Creech?
Good evening, how are y'all?
Good.
The item that I have, just trying to, got some equipment that's gonna come in. We've got a truck that's coming in, either tomorrow, Wednesday, a garbage truck. And my understanding is that, back, a few months back, they had a resolution to change an engine in the garbage truck, and it was replacing a previous, resolution. Well, what we've come into is that what I wanted to make sure is funding-wise, the equipment was designated in 2018 budget to be a lease. And now the equipment's coming in, and I think, when I went back and viewed some of the meetings, I think it was questioned if we're gonna continue doing lease on these equipment. But, in the government world, the lease would just be a funding mechanism. You know, you can go out to the banks and get rates, and it's just gonna be, you know, a 3-year payment on this equipment. Now, these equipment is part of general fund, being the garbage trucks. It's part of general fund, and talking with Richard Johnson, that helps him funding-wise to be able to pay it over a 3-year period versus, like what we have, a truck coming in this week, and then we have another one due in, July 15th. That's right at $500,000 worth of equipment. So funding it was to do a lease and have lease payments go through. So I'm here just to find out if that's still the direction of the council, or if it's not, to do a, you know, a financing mechanism. We'd have to find another way, because it's not in 19's budget to pay $500,000 out for this equipment. So, and then there is part of the budget that was done originally to purchase the equipment in 18. There's also another piece of equipment that's been ordered that's not due until November of 19. So, I've reached out to the bank that did the last piece of equipment, and, it's a good rate of 2.87%. Anyway, I'm just needing direction on which direction y'all wanna go, and give me some ideas.
I think when we had, we ran into some issues with this, Marcus, I don't know if you
Is this the
got around
same
it. This is the
equipment that we
same,
were talking about?
I'm pretty sure this is what we were talking about back then.
This is a different piece. There was
Okay.
some, that we,
Okay.
Some issue, one resolution said procure, and then we were leasing when all the paperwork started coming in, and we had to correct that.
Well, there was one.
We had one that said
issue
lease
was
purchase.
purchase.
That was golf carts. Right.
Nah, it
Yeah,
was
that was
other
a
stuff
different-
too, I
There was
thought.
another one too,
We
though.
purchase for $1 at the end, or we turn it in.
and this you don't. You're not gonna turn this equipment back in.
This is just
It's $1 purchase at the end of the term.
So, and it's just a finance mechanism. Now, y'all did sign in January from Caterpillar, was a financing mechanism at the end, it's $1. And that was at an interest rate of 5.35, which I thought was really high. Now, my past experience, when we're gonna get yellow equipment and these garbage trucks or dump trucks, we would do a financing mechanism like this, and we'd call it a master lease, and we'd go out to these banks and find out what we could get the lowest rate. And a bank would set it up if we wanted 3 years or 5 years, or whatever, you know, whatever we would decide, and be able to find the lowest rate. And it was just that equipment is ours, but they are on the title as a lien holder, just like if you were purchasing a car. And, it was just a financing mechanism.
But it's with a $1 buyout and not a fair market value buyout at the end, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
No issue with that, like we were running into with the other ones that we're saying.
Yeah, the lawn equipment at the golf course was a fair market value buyout at the end, and we were just turning it back in. And we'd actually bought some of those items off lease, so you effectively kind of paid for twice. But
Right.
if this is a situation where it's $1 lease, that's just a decision y'all are gonna make, whether or not you want to finance it or buy it outright. I think that's your question.
Yeah, that is my question, and I think from Richard Johnson, who's not here, the conversation I had for him is trying to budget that and fund it, you know, being that it's in the garbage department, general fund, funding wise, it's not as, let's put as rich, I wouldn't call it rich, but you know, the utilities have a little bit more
Right.
money that we could go out in the utilities and be able to have fund balance to be able to go and buy those equipments. The general fund under solid waste is not as, we don't have the luxury of that.
Sure. My thought would be, guys, is that, I know we've had some discussion long-term, whether we want to avoid leases in the future. and switch over to straight purchase because we have the cash reserves at different times to do that. This, seems like the original intent was to lease them in order to give kind of more budget flexibility within that department. It might make sense, at least currently, to stick with what the original plan was, because that's what's been worked out in the budget. And, when we're preparing 2020's budget, if we want to change that and change the way we purchase moving forward, it'll be simpler to do it that way.
That's good. And what I do
Maybe.
want to research also is the leases that you went with, Caterpillar Financial, is to look and see if there's a way that, because of the rate I got at the current bank that we've been using, at 5.35 versus the quote he just gave me at 2.87, I'd like to see if we can pay off those and refinance them because of the interest rate, because we just signed them in January. I wanted to look at that because I just think that since we just signed them a few months ago, then if there's a way that I can pay those off and refinance them through New Liberia, then we're saving some money, and that's still just general fund.
Right.
Guys, what else? I gave my thoughts.
I'm in agreement with that. I think that, initially we were trying to resolve that issue where there was a lump sum buyout at the end of the lease, and that wasn't what we had intended to enter into. But I think if you're calling it a lease, I mean, you're essentially just financing it over 2 or 3 years, and at the end of the term, you own it without having to make a large balloon payment. Then I think that's fine. I think we should just, for the sake of simplicity, go with what we've already got in the works.
Okay.
As far as financing options, yes, if you can find something at a better rate.
Any money you can save would be appreciated.
Well, that's what I'm working towards. When I ran across that today, I was like, I want to see if I can refinance that at a better rate at our current, bank that has given us a quote. That's what I'd like to be able to do.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I just want to make sure I got this straight. I like to deal with simple. You got $500,000, we got to come up with one way or the other, either through a lease or finance.
That's right.
At the end of the lease, it's paid for
Yes, it is our equipment.
through that lease. So which is cheaper between, I don't see the number, I don't have the number, which is cheaper between the lease and the payment and the finance?
Well, that's what she's saying.
It's the
It's the same thing.
It's the same. It's a financing mechanism.
Yeah.
So
You're calling it a lease, but it's really just a per-year finance.
Yeah.
It's at a local bank borrowing the money. They're paying the invoice, and then we're going to be paying them over 3 years. It's
Right.
our equipment.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Appreciate it. Committee updates. Anybody? Councilman Conyers?
The main thing for the Historic Preservation Committee was going to be the presentation we just heard from Mary Shell. Thank you for traveling down here, if she's still here. Beyond that, library board, we had a meeting earlier this month, and I think that we'll probably wind up not having one. I think they may have canceled the later meeting, but everything's going well at the library. A lot of good things. The makerspace is really, really neat. If y'all have never seen what a 3D printer can do, that's certainly worth going to check out. And so far, so good on the renovations or the repairs to the library. And we've had some pretty heavy storms, so that's good news. And then the Environmental Advisory Board should be meeting this Friday. So that's it.
All right. Robert?
Bike, or PED Bike Committee did not meet this month. They'll meet next month. The Education Advisory Committee met this past week. I was out of town. I got the update. They're continuing to talk about proceeding steps with the special tax district after the county commission votes on it, hopefully next week, trying to inform the public of both the date and what the referendum will do. That's it.
Mr. Boone?
We had a special personnel board meeting to discuss the job classification compensation for the new job position the mayor was putting up. And very good conversation. And we got everything settled through the personnel board side of it. And we are having another meeting on the 20th of June at 7:15, which will be a regular meeting.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
All right. And I don't have any updates for this meeting, so I will move into department head updates. I'm not going to call you out, so anybody that's got something that's eager to volunteer, come on up. If not, Jay or Beaver, come on.
Go first, Jay.
Now, Buford, does that mean you sort of have something, or
I do have something, but
you were going to wait
Jay
till?
wanted to go first.
You were gonna wait till
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jay.
I'd just like to give you a heads up where we're at on the lining of the pipes, the sewer pipes. Our contract currently runs to the end of the year, and we'll address that at the end of the year. But the CE&I portion of it, which is ran by the engineering firm of Volkert, their contract runs out in April, and it did. And so we're putting it together, and you'll have to make a decision on how we move forward. But if we don't use them, you know, that contract's probably going to come to a stop, and the money's already set aside for the contract for Suncoast, but not for Volkert. So that'll be on the next agenda, and I would just want to give everybody a heads up. And I don't know, you probably don't have questions yet, but it will be part of the next agenda that we're requesting. Right now, I think it's $40,000 to take it to the end of the year. I don't think I'm going to spend that much because we already have almost a 3-month gap by the time you approve it. So, but we would like to get as much product as we can out of this. So I'm asking for your help on that. All right?
Okay.
All right, that's
Thanks,
it.
sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jay.
Okay, Buford, you sort of have it.
That's right. Good afternoon, council. Good afternoon, Ms. Hanks.
afternoon.
I just wanted to take a moment and thank the citizens that participated in the work session and also the public hearing that we had at the last Planning Commission meeting. And this is related to the Greeno Road Corridor Overlay District that we're preparing. And so thank those citizens who attended, provided their input, and thank the Planning Commission for their input as well. Just wanted to reiterate for council that that was the first draft, and staff is working on revisions and trying to synthesize everything that we heard and to improve the document that we have. So we will have that item, same item, have that document on the next Planning Commission meeting agenda for July 1st. And not speaking for the Planning Commission, but it's probably a reasonable expectation they may wish to not act upon it till the August meeting, which is certainly understandable. But just wanted to keep this out in front of the public, that it is being worked on, it is being revised. I had some great comments, and so we're doing some certain things to possibly simplify it, which may have the effect of changing some parts of the zoning ordinance itself to make it work together. But we will see that again July 1st. And then once we have the document ready for publish on that agenda, I'll give a courtesy copy to all the council members as well.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. You are number 6, 7, and 8.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, 5, 6, and 7 on the agenda.
Yes, sir.
These are all things that we went through last meeting. Assuming that there isn't any comment from the public as it pertains to those 3 things. Has anything changed since the presentation you made last week?
No, sir.
2 weeks ago, sorry.
No, sir. Council members, all of the information is the same. In the slides that we will have for the council and the public to see on item number 5, to answer some of the questions about infrastructure, specifically about sewer, we have added a couple slides. I want to thank Richard Peterson for assisting with preparing them. We will have that, and so we'll explain that. We'll just basically briefly reiterate what was heard last time, answer those questions about sewer infrastructure, and then turn it over to the council for consideration.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anybody else? Going once, seeing no takers. All right. All right, then we'll start looking at the agenda. Buford, you have 5, 6, and 7. We are going to table 8 and 9. So number 10, who will be number 10? All right, number 10, number 11. And as far as number 10 is concerned, is there anything special for us to know about that?
The only thing Mr. Johnson wanted me to read, I'm the first one on there, 30, County Road 32 and 98.
to pull off, but the other ones he recommended that we do the maintenance agreements for those.
Okay, so we are not going to agree to,
January 32 and 98.
okay, so it's been pulled from that already.
It might be in your pictures.
Okay, but it's not.
in the.
It's not in the resolution.
Mm-mm.
Okay, all right. Thanks, sir. Number 11,
Lynn,
is that you?
Lynn.
Lynn?
Yes.
Number 11?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Any issues with that, you'll be able to address that, Lynn? Yes. Number 12 has been pulled at the request of the developer. Number 13, and council, I'll inform all of you, something that Councilman Brown and I discussed prior to the meeting starting is, this is a request from the Fairhope Junior City Council to have the fees waived for Founders Park to host a kickball tournament as a fundraiser. We typically do not waive fees, and if Jack was here, he would say if you waive for one, you have to waive for all, and he would be right. And I think this fee is $200, but since they are technically a not-for-profit, they get a discount, which I'm not sure is 40 or 50%.
50%.
50%. So the fee would be $100. And so the request would be that the Fairhope City Council cover the $100. So that we're not waiving anything, we're just
Paying it for them?
paying it for them as the Junior City Council. You don't have to vote now. You got time to think about it. And whatever we vote on, Jack will be obligated to comply.
Is that $20 a piece? Is that how that works?
That'd be $20 a piece, yes, sir.
We're not buying.
We're not buying the park.
We're
no,
not
sir.
buying anything, Howard.
I don't think
Make sure
so.
we're not getting.
No.
We're just paying. We're just covering their
fee.
their fee. All right, number 14. Who would be here to discuss that if necessary? Okay. Not all right. Maybe nobody. Okay. Number 15. We've talked about, so I don't know that if anybody got any questions, I think me or Lisa might could answer that.
True.
Okay. And number 16 is something, officer in here right now.
Hamrick's gonna be here.
All right, Hamrick, John.
John Hamrick.
All right, we'll ask him then. All right. That's it. We'll see everybody at 6 o'clock.
You eat dinner now.